Hello, lovely listeners, and welcome back deep down into the rabbit hole. The rabbit hole where we've put up some stakes and we've put up some scarecrows just to scare away any crows that might be trying to burrow underground. Are there any birds that burrow underground?
They're trying to get Mark's fruit.
Okay, they are. I've been all over that. Yeah.
Birds need to be regular too.
I feel like there are some birds that perhaps burrow underground, but I don't know. I don't know that right now. But what I do know is we're back. Welcome back, everyone. We're back with Mark. Stay again. Mark, are you still here?
I am, yes. And thank you for the regular toilet breaks, the constant supply of fruit and fibre. And I'm delighted to be here once more.
Good week down the hole then.
It was, definitely. You'll see the review on TripAdvisor soon. It's 4.5.
We're getting a few of them, I think.
We are, yeah. Finally, a good review.
And Nikki, you're here.
I am. I never left. Oh, it was great. It was interesting. I ate all the Cocoa Pops because obviously no one was touching them. Yeah, so I'm a little bit hyped up on sugar. But
I had all the Frosties.
Oh, did you? Oh,
they're great.
Oh, somebody wants a sponsorship.
Forget it. I was on a podcast for years and we were constantly mentioning chocolate hobnobs. Not so much as a whisker of attention from McVitie's.
Not a knob.
Exactly.
Not a hob or a knob.
No.
How rude, McVitie's.
Well, it was their loss, wasn't it?
It was indeed. So, I mean, it was somewhat of a cliffhanger, I suppose. But I was asking Mark whether he knew about any cases of real scarecrows, and when I was looking around, there's quite a few cases of mistaken identity of unfortunately deceased bodies as scarecrows at various points in history. But something I found, and I only found it on another podcast, so I'm not sure kind of the accuracy, and I couldn't find any more details elsewhere, but apparently French troops during World War I, in a slightly kind of foggy, boggy field when they were being chased by the German army, they put up some scarecrows as a lure to lure the German soldiers into this particular area so then that they could attack them, so they would think that they were there. That sort of led me down another rabbit hole, which was looking at the Ghost Army. Has anybody heard of this? The Ghost Army from World War II?
No, go on.
So during World War II, the Allies employed a unique tactical deception unit known as the Ghost Army, or the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, and they were tasked with inflatable tanks, trucks, and other vehicles, and they would blow them up to make it look like our armies were much bigger than they actually were.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this was in the run-up to D-Day as well, to make them think that there were troops massing in different parts of the country. And masculine, that's where we get masculine devices from, isn't it? And he would also paint. They would paint the boats so that they when you look at them from a distance, you can't see destroyers. It sort of masks their shape and things like that. So yeah, I'm always I love anything like that, anything that has this kind of inkling in the real world. So the third book, The Ghost of Ivy Barn, the witches have to do a ritual called a Cone of Power ritual, where they ward off the invasion. And this actually happened. There was a fellow called Gerald Gardner, I think, and it was in the New Forest. I put it on the cliffs of Dover because it's local. But it was in the New Forest where they were basically doing this ritual saying you cannot cross the sea in order to thwart the Nazi invasion. And it went on for hours and hours. A lot of them were naked, covered in goose fat. Apparently two of them died. So it was this extraordinary ritual. So, in the third book, the witches, this sort of charismatic druid comes along and says, "Look, I've got this ritual to ward off the invasion, but you're going to have to do it naked." And they're like, "No way, we're not having that." So it's so if I love little things like that. I'm always looking for little nuggets of history that I can put in there just to ground it in reality just a bit.
Well, I was imagining a return. I wanted the crow folk to come back on this inflatable tank at the middle of Woodville. We're back.
You never know.
How long would it take to inflate a tank? I mean, I can barely do an airbed.
Yeah, and they had like thousands of them as well. They had loads. They did like staged more than 20 mock battles between 1944 and 1945, and it was just 1,100 men who were the Ghost Army, and they were tasked with inflating all those inflatable tanks.
That's a lot of foot pumps. Yeah.
It's a lot of puff.
Yeah.
No.
I did some balloons for my nephew's birthday a couple of months ago, and I was almost dead at the end of it. I don't have asthma, you know, I'm pretty fit, but I was just kind of like, no, this is enough. I could not. No, I can't even imagine that. So, Mark, let's talk magic in your books.
Yeah.
In terms of the research that you did, I know you've kind of talked about researching different druidic things. You talked about Hecate. We actually went into Hecate quite recently, didn't we, Lisa, for our Greek myths episode that we did with Hazel Atkinson. And I find the whole thing absolutely fascinating myself. I love the kind of magic, and I love the paranormal and the supernatural and things. So what sort of rabbit holes did you jump down?
Oh my God, so many. I mean, what you I've got a lot of pagan and Wiccan friends, and when they heard I was writing this series, I would get steely looks from them where they go, "Don't make us look like idiots." And so I wanted to do this in a way that again felt grounded, felt real. So you look at things like there are various books. There's a book called The Book of English Magic, which talks about the history of witchcraft and paganism in this country. And there is Thames and Hudson do a great book on occult, witchcraft, and magic. That classic Reader's Digest book on folklore was really, really handy as well. So you look again for just little nuggets of the kinds of magic that witches might have used. So there's candle magic, mirror magic, all that blood magic, all of that kind of thing, and then extrapolate it from there. And I mean, the thing with magic as well is it needed to feel organic. It had to have that ritualistic feel to it. I remember picking up one of Brandon Sanderson's fantasy novels, and this is no slight on Brandon or anyone who likes this kind of magic, but there was this sort of appendix in the back that said, if you add this element to this element, it creates this kind of magic. And it was like the rules of a Dungeons and Dragons game, which again is a legitimate branch of fantasy, but I'm like, that is not me at all. Am I supposed to remember this? Is this important? I find it quite off-putting. So I wanted it to feel organic and have that kind of history behind it, and have a slight mystery behind it as well. I never really explained how it all works, and to have that kind of Britishness to it as well, that I've enjoyed, in sort of folklore films and books in the past, folk horror kind of elements to it. It's finding those little ritual touches that have a grounded feel to them, and then drawing it out from there, and then sprinkling a bit of storytelling magic in it as well. And the important thing with magic as well is it can't just be that Deus ex machina thing of getting your hero out of trouble. There has to be a cost. There has to be, a price to pay at the end of the day, or what have you. So it can't just make things easier. It usually should cause more problems than it solves. So yeah, you go down all kinds of rabbit holes, looking for new ways to do it, and I've learned a lot from it as well, and it does give you an appreciation of how a lot of this magic is rooted in the seasons, in agriculture, in farming. I mean, the Corn Bride, the 5th book I'm working on at the moment, is very much rooted in that. They used to take the last seed of the harvest, bury it, put it in a corn dolly, and bury it in a field, so that the spirit of that harvest would carry on to the next year. Little things like that, where it's no one really does that. People make corn dollies, but generally don't know why they do it. It's sort of digging down to the why do people used to do this? What's the thinking behind this? And there's usually some lovely little idea that you can fold into the story and enrich it.
It's always fascinated me. In Northamptonshire, we've got quite a deep heritage of sort of witchcraft. Oh, I suppose everywhere does, really, in England. One place that I've always wanted to go to is the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic.
Yes.
I don't know whether you ever managed to get there in
I've
Cornwall.
not yet. No, I've been recommended it many, many times. So yeah, it's on the bucket list.
They have, depending on the time of year in that, they'll have different kind of ceremonies in that, and they have like a troupe of dark Morris dancers,
Ah,
which has always kind of fascinated me.
funny you should mention that. We got Morris dancers in the 5th one as well.
Are they dark? I don't want to see some evil. I want to see some evil Morris dancing.
They're doing a border Morris, which is kind of as punk as it gets with Morris dancing. So,
Needs a comeback, doesn't it, Morris dancing?
well, it's quite, again, round here. Because as I did with the bell ringing in the first book, because a sort of a running gag through the series is the bell ringers and the Morris dancers have this sort of bitter rivalry in the village. And as much as the bell ringers saved the day in the first book, it comes down to the Morris dancers. Are they up to it in the 5th book? And I gave it to a local Morris dancing group up the road here in a place called Wantsum. And they came back with some ideas and corrections and thoughts, but mostly got it right. And hopefully, when I launch the book, they're going to come along and do some dancing at the bookshop. So yeah, it's one of the, you have these little traditions like bell ringing and Morris dancing, where they're clinging on by their fingernails, but it's still going thanks to sort of passionate groups of weirdos. Let's call them weirdos. My wife's one of them who love doing these things, and again, there's an element of ritual to it as well. And the other thing I've discovered looking into folklore and magic and ritual is no one agrees on anything. There's no one way of doing this. They'll all have their different take on why something is done in a particular way or why it was done, and a lot of the reasoning has been lost in the mists of time. But people come across and say, I'm an authority on magic and we do this because of this, this, and this. But then you'll find 5 others who have a very different opinion on the same subject. So once I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, there's no right or wrong in this. It just needs to have, in my own little universe, it has to have a consistency and has to feel authentic. But actually, there's no one right way of doing this. So unlike those Brandon Sanderson rules of you must take A and mix it with B and you'll get C, I can, as long as it's consistent in my own little universe, I can sort of do whatever I want with it.
I think that's most of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
The history around Northamptonshire is huge. Some of the stuff that I've looked into. I mean, we've got the whole Guy Fawkes was plotting in one of our local kind of historical buildings and things like that.
We're always on the periphery, I feel like.
We are,
when
yeah.
we look at Northampton history, it's always like, or the Great Fire of Northampton. There was like a great, wasn't there? It was like, oh, you had a fire in London. We had one too. We had one here as well. And always slightly subversive. Have you heard any of those? Like the fact that we've got, is it James First up on the All Saints Church in the middle of the town? And we had to build him there because he gave us the money to rebuild the town after the Great Fire of Northampton. But we were a bit subversive with it. So I think we put him in a toga, like to kind of take the mickey out of him a bit. and when at some point in its history the arm fell off, I think somebody just stuck like a wooden arm up there instead. So it's like, yes, we will honour you with this, but we're going to put it in a toga.
I love there's an image, if you Google it, the Northamptonshire witches, and it's an infamous image of 3 witches riding pigs through the town.
Wow.
Yes.
In 1612, I just looked it up, July 1612, that they were condemned to death for it. So don't ride pigs through the town, I think is the
moral of the story. Yeah.
Well, it was part of their accusation, wasn't it? Because they were part of the 5 hung at the Abington gallows. And I think they were accused, it was Agnes Brown and Joan Vaughan, her daughter, and they were accused of bewitching Elizabeth Belcher, which that's an unfortunate name, isn't it? Maybe they bewitched her with Windy Pops.
fruit and fibre.
Yeah, they gave her some fruit because she had an encounter with Joan and then she fell ill. And then they found, was it Helen Jenks, and they believed she had the witch's mark. She had the devil's mark on her body. And Mary Barber was accused of bewitching cattle. And then there was something, I think there's some different kind of versions of these trials. in history. But yeah, the three of them were caught riding a pig. I think it was Agnes, Joan, and Mary were caught riding a pig. because that's obviously obviously some magic involved in that, isn't there?
Clearly, I did a little quartet of short, because one of the witches in the series is called Miss Charlotte, and she's hundreds of years old. And I did a quartet of short stories, which you can get if you sign up to the newsletter, witchesofwoodville.com, folks. And it's called
Nice.
the last night of the Witchfinder General, where she tracks down the Witchfinder General, and you discover, because his death is sort of mired in mystery, and you discover what really happened to him, and it wasn't fun. So yeah, I'm always fascinated in those little nuggets, and the short stories allow me to go into the village's history, and just pluck out something a bit fun and unusual, and so yeah, anything like that. My radar is always on for those kind of stories and those kind of events, and just try and fold them in, just to give. You don't want to lean into it too much, but just a little sprinkling gives the whole village this kind of history and tapestry to it, which I love.
I think England's special for stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can look in any corner and find some sort of heritage, some sort of fun, that we weren't really taking ourselves. Well, I mean, they hung those witches, so that was taken pretty seriously.
Yeah. Like I said, there's lots of World War II history around here, but also if I sort of stand on tiptoes, I can see a place called Reculver, where there's ruins of an old church, but also ruins of an old Roman fort. And Caesar might have walked through my back garden at one point when he invaded the country. So it's just so rich and full of history that it'd be daft not to tap into it in some way and have fun with that, which as a writer I love.
I think he definitely would have commented on your wife's roses. He walked through, but he looked around and went, "Oh, she's done a very good job on this garden. It's lovely."
So, Mark, tell us a little bit about you've got a fantasy books as well. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yes, well, I've written 2/3 of a trilogy. So I've got the End of Magic and the End of Dragons, and then next year, 2025, will be the End of Gods, and that was going to be my big epic fantasy series. But what I loved is I wrote the first one around just as sort of Brexit was happening and Trump was coming in, and the world seemed Bowie died and everything seemed to be going to hell in a handcart. So it actually became about something, and I'm very big on having a strong sort of thematic, central, dramatic argument to my stories. And I like it when they're actually about something, but in the dressing of a fun adventure, what have you. So you've got with the End of Magic, you've got a world where mages draw their power from a moon in orbit. It's a lapis moon in orbit, and one day it gets destroyed, hit by a meteorite. So their magic is gone, and I send them on a quest which would be really tricky with magic and is impossible without it. So it becomes a kind of Suicide Squad for fantasy. And then with the End of Dragons, I coerce them into they have to kill the last living dragon. They don't want to, but they're forced to do it. So the books are a bit more grimdark in tone compared to the Witches of Woodville, but there's a similar kind of dry sense of humour. And again, I do that thing of just I love torturing my characters. I love pushing them to the edge and doing terrible, terrible things to them, like an Old Testament god, and then seeing how they dust themselves off and get on with it. So it's been really, really good fun. I love the fantasy genre, but I can't stand the pomposity of some of it. So this is, there's a big fan of Terry Pratchett, big fan of any fantasy that has a right sense of humour, like Joe Abercrombie or whatever. So yeah, that was like I said, I'm 2/3 into that and having really, really great fun with it, and it's epic on a whole different scale. So it's just need to finish the third one. Small matter of that, but I'm getting on with it. I'm getting there.
That's the problem with being an author, isn't it? The writing.
Well, you got to learn to love the process, and I'm lucky enough to, like I said, I worked in publishing. I was made redundant about 5 years ago, and that was enough money. That was like enough money to keep me going for about a year, and that helped me get the momentum going and write as much as I possibly could. So I'm very lucky in that I can do this full time, thanks to my wife's gardening,
as approved by Julius Caesar.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. We'll put that on the business card. We came, we saw, we conquered. So yeah, it's every day. I used to commute into London and work in an office and look at spreadsheets, but now my commute is down a flight of steps into this office where I make shit up for a living. So, brilliant.
What would be your advice to anyone who perhaps is thinking about starting writing?
Listen to the Bestseller Experiment podcast, which I'm not on anymore, but we've got 500 odd episodes out there because we would, like yourselves, and listen to this podcast. So, we spoke to authors all the time and got hints and tips, and it definitely made me a better writer, no question whatsoever. I think the most important thing is to develop a writing habit, and it's the most difficult thing, particularly people have jobs, they have families, they have obligations. So finding the time to write is really, really the first hurdle you need to overcome. And what we discovered from talking to a lot of authors is even if it's just 20 minutes a day, at least if you're starting out, try and write every day. I know some people hate the write every day thing, but it does work. If you just want to do 20 minutes a day or 200 words a day, just target yourself that. It just keeps that momentum going. But if you were learning to play a musical instrument, you wouldn't take 2 weeks off in the summer and say, I'm going to master the piano. No, you practice your scales every day, even if it's little and often, little and often, little and often. And it when after The Crowfolk came out during the second lockdown, and I was contracted to do a second book. And I think, like a lot of authors, the wind had gone out of my sails. So that thing of doing a little bit every day got me back into the groove again, and it certainly worked for me anyway. So I think try and develop a habit, find some time. People say, oh, I need to make time. The time's already there. You do have to sacrifice. Stop watching whatever crappy TV. Stop watching the news. Stop watching the news. Exactly. Ignore children, family. These are the things you need to conquer. No, but stop watching the news. Stop scrolling, doom scrolling on social media. It doesn't help. Instead, bring a little happiness into the world with stories about scarecrows and goblins and stuff like that. Because we'll appreciate that a lot more, I think. And if you can do a little bit every day, then what you discover is that momentum builds and builds and builds, and before you know it, you've finished something, which is the hurdle most aspiring authors don't overcome. Finishing something that they can start, but they can't always finish.
And maybe, I suppose, we talked a little bit about the arts, didn't we, in the first part, or the importance of creativity in our lives. And I think there's often this misconception in the arts that you've got to create something. You've got to make something brilliant straight away. And if it's not brilliant, how can you possibly carry on with it? And I think we should really all embrace that. Just do a little bit every day then. Just do a little bit of something you love every day that you enjoy doing, and maybe it will turn into something.
Oh, it almost definitely will turn into something if you can bring yourself to it. I mean, the other thing we've found is having some sort of accountability partner. My co-presenter on the podcast, Mark DeVoe, he loves running, and he would say that he has someone that he runs with, because when it's cold and wet, it's very easy to go, well, stuff that for a laugh. I'm not doing that. But if someone is knocking at the door saying, "Come on, it's time to go," you kind of have to get up and go. So if you can find someone that you can say every day, or maybe it's a group on social media where you can say, hey, I've done my bit for the day, have you? How's it going? Just G each other along in a kind of non-judgmental way, then I think you're much more likely to succeed. And as communities grow around podcasts. That's one of the great things about the Bestseller Experiment, is we got this wonderful community of writers. And I've got 2 shelves over there, sort of 2 books deep, of people who heard someone on the podcast and were inspired to write. And some of them have got deals with Gollancz, some of them have won awards. We've got Amazon Storyteller Award winners, and we've got people who just wanted to finish their book and self-publish it and get it out there. And it's, you all have your own goals that you want to achieve, but it starts with you doing the work. You've got to do the work, and it might just be 20 minutes a day, and that's great. That's brilliant. And you're off.
I think you're right about the accountability as well. I've run a writers group locally for about 12 years. I mean, it's 35 members now. Fortunately,
Wow.
they don't all turn up at the same time. But it's nice to have those people there, and it's definitely pushed me forward because I felt like, I'm running the group. I need to lead from the
Yes.
front, and I need to show them
Yeah.
that, that I'm not going to just binge Netflix for this afternoon. I am going to actually put, fingertip to laptop and start actually living the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, like I said, I had a day job, I had a commute. It was, it could be hard work. But I was very much a work to rule person towards the end. I'd have an hour for lunch and I'd leave at 5:30. I was like, I'm too old for this shit. But now I'm a self-employed writer. I'm the worst boss ever because I work nights, I work weekends, I don't have holidays. I'm at it all the time. But then that's because I think I recognize how lucky I am to do this and how much I enjoy it. I so much love it. I will never complain on social media about, oh, I'm stuck with this and blah blah blah, because I know how lucky this has been a dream for a very very long time, and now I'm doing it, and I've got, Claire supports me, my family supports me, they, and readers have been absolutely brilliant. I'm not making a lot of money doing it, but I'm absolutely loving it, and it's a proper privilege, and you know that's why I'll work every spare minute I've got, basically.
Yeah, there's this massive kind of misconception about how much money we make as authors, that we're all kind of J.K. Rowling or Stephen King, and it's not like that at all.
Yes, yeah. The I forget, was it the Society of Authors did a survey a couple of years ago or a year or so
Oh.
ago, and the average earnings of an author
Okay.
is about £7,000. And the last survey they did before that, 3 or 4 years before that, it was about 11.5 grand. So it's going down all the time. So most of us are skint, most of us are brassic, and of course you only ever hear about those big six-figure deals on the news or even in the trade press. So most of us are struggling to get along. I don't see how that's going to change, to be honest, but we have to keep buggering on, as they say, because the alternative is unthinkable, having to do a proper job.
But it's not just that; it's what we put out into the world. I always think, we make up probably about 95% of the books that people read is coming from authors just like
Yeah,
us, who are not earning an absolute
yeah.
fortune, and we're doing the best we can in the place we've got, and it's, to me, it's like I'd rather take even if I take one reader away from their problems for a day, I've done my job.
I think we're too quick to self-deprecate what we do. I remember Claire and I were working with a theatre company called Unity Theatre because I started out wanting to be an actor, and we worked with a theatre company called Unity Theatre. One of the actors there, a brilliant Irish actor called Declan Mulholland, who was the original Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars, by the way.
What, in the costume or the voice?
He was in the original Star Wars. He's a big Irish guy in a big hairy suit. If you Google original Jabba the Hutt, he was there with Harrison Ford. He was brilliant because he was only supposed to work for a day, but there was a problem with the camera, and he got a week's work out of it and got to know Harrison Ford quite well. He was a lovely man by all accounts. He talked about an actors' strike, back in the day, and I sort of joked, "Oh, did anyone actually notice?" And he got quite angry with me, and he says, "What we do is important. Any kind of creative endeavor is bringing a light into the world. It's bringing people hope. It's showing them stories. It's showing them the world. It's showing them empathy. What we do, without getting too highfalutin about it, is it can change people's lives. It can show them a perspective they've never seen before. It can entertain, which these days I'm eternally grateful for. Any kind of distraction or entertainment that can nourish the soul, then yeah, why not?
My debut Little Bones came out during COVID, and I had no end of readers contacting me saying, I've just spent the last 2 days just reading your book, and it took me away. It's just what I needed, kind of thing. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think it does make a difference. And
yeah.
I'm kind of that idiot that always believes that, with every book that we put out, it's a spin of the wheel to see if it could make us some money.
I mean, I've having worked in the publishing industry, a lot of it's preordained because if someone gets a huge advance, that advance has to be earned back, so it becomes a lead title. So therefore, all the marketing and publicity budget goes on those super lead titles. It used to be a bit more evenly spread, but these days it's all geared towards those big lead titles. It's really tricky if you don't have that marketing and publicity support to make any kind of impact, sadly. Like I say, it's film companies interested in these, and you never know what's around the corner. Some TikToker might like it, and suddenly you're off to the races. So you just have to. It's a bit like I work in on film and TV projects that most of the time go absolutely nowhere. But it's like spread betting, because the more you put out there, eventually something's gonna take off. So I've had 2 films made, which for a UK screenwriter is actually a pretty good batting average. So yeah, you just have to trust in the process and enjoy the process, and hope that eventually, something clicks, because you never know what's around the corner.
Just talking about all your riches you make as writers, aren't you? All your wood panelled leather seating offices that you're in right now.
Yeah, I'm working on a board that's literally across 2 open drawers of my dressing table. Luxury. Living the dream.
It's just gonna turn into the 4 Yorkshiremen chess. Is it a board? You were lucky.
Well, on that note, listeners, we're going to wind this one up. Not to have depressed you too much about your views of authors, but we tell it like it is down the red rabbit hole. So, Mark, let us know where all your books can be found, and you are going to provide links, aren't you, for us for the show, so anyone who wants to buy them can very easily find them.
Yeah, you betcha. I mean, they're available in all good bookshops. If you want signed copies, you can get them direct from me as well. There's a little store on witchesofwoodville.com. If you want to find me, I'm also at markstaywrites.com. Another Mark Stay beat me to markstay.com. I'm very annoyed about that.
What does he do?
He lives in Brisbane now. I've got family in Brisbane, but I don't think he's any direct relation. And he's a commercial artist, so he was way ahead of the curve there. So yes, you can find. I mean, there aren't many Mark Stay. I'm in a sort of on Instagram. I'm on a sort of hashtag war with a town in Ontario called Mark Stay Warren. So I think so we're going to go to war over that soon. But yeah, if you look me up on social media, you'll find me somewhere. But it's. I also do mentoring and writing advice and editing and stuff like that. So if you're ever looking for advice on writing, like I say, I've worked in publishing, book selling, and I've made every mistake, so you don't have to. So
that's a lovely slogan. Yeah. I've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to.
We've got all the taglines for all the businesses on this podcast, haven't we?
The number 2 Mark Stay.
Exactly.
The rights. Hey, we don't know what the guy in Brisbane does or does not do. So.
Yes.
Well, it's not. Well, I've got the hairdresser, haven't I? If you Google Lisa Shepherd, you'll just find the hairdresser. Very famous hairdresser called Lisa Shepherd. I kind of fancied one day just walking into one of her shops, because she's normally got their own under her name, her salons. Just walking in and going, "Can I get a free haircut because we have the same name?"
There is another Mark Stay author who many years ago wrote or self-published sort of spiritualist Christian sort of fiction, which isn't me at all. So I'm the anti-Mark Stay, if anything.
If you have a look on Amazon, there is another Nicky Peacock. I mean, I write under NV Peacock anyway, but there is a Nicky Peacock who wrote a romantic book, and I received a messenger message from my Facebook, and it was from a man's wife, and she had found a copy of that romantic book, indicating that Nicky Peacock was having an affair with her husband. Ooh. And basically accused me of being her. And I was like, I don't know your husband. I've never met your husband. And that wasn't my writing.
Oh my gosh. You've both got doppelgangers that are kind of the opposites of you.
Yeah.
And maybe the hairdresser's opposite of mine. Thankfully, no listeners have to see my hair right now to know how terrible it is.
It was most shocking because at first I sort of saw it and was like, what have I put in someone's book that's made them think, that I'm having an affair with them? I mean, the closest I've ever come is one of my serial killers has a catchphrase of "see you real soon," and I've written that in several
Yeah.
books. Gonna see you real soon, Mark. But yeah, that was quite a shocking turn of events for a Sunday afternoon.
A Sunday afternoon as well.
I was like, what? Getting accused of having an affair with someone's husband.
That's too much for a Sunday. That's just
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to get back to you on this at 9 a.m. on Monday.
Yeah. So, listeners, we are well. Do you know what? I was going to say we're leaving the rabbit hole. I mean, that's a lie. Me and Lisa, we never leave the rabbit hole, and I don't think we're going to let Mark leave the rabbit hole either.
Never.
I think he's going to have to stay with us for a little bit longer.
The sack goes back over my head.
We'll have a steady supply of generic fruit and fibre for you, just to point that out.
I'll dig a little tunnel into the factory and it'll just start rolling down. And then we can turn it into a little chute on the wall and you can just
dairy on the other side. It would be like some sort of Roald Dahl fantastic Mr. Fox creation.
Well, as long as you got a supply of fruit and fibre, I'll be fine.
Do remember to follow the Red Rabbit, listeners, wherever you go. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and we do have a Patreon page where you can listen to the next episode. Who knows what it's going to be? We don't know right now. So you'll know well before us, which is fun. You will hear us next time, listeners. So goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having me on.